Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the invisible architecture of human connection, the patterns that govern how you attract, attach, push away, and bond with others in ways you've never consciously recognized. This isn't dating advice or relationship tips. This is the psychology behind why you keep choosing the same type of person, why intimacy feels dangerous, and why your patterns haven't changed no matter how much you've tried. Get comfortable. Dim the lights. Let the world fade into background noise. We're about to explore 49 psychological principles, evolutionary wiring, attachment patterns, cognitive biases that shape your romantic life without your awareness. From why you're drawn to people who can't love you back, to the childhood experiences still running your adult relationships, to the social conditioning about love you've never questioned. Some of this will be uncomfortable. Some of it will feel like finally understanding yourself. All of it is drawn from psychology and neuroscience. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. And awareness is where change begins. If you find value in what I do here, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. I'm always curious who's out there absorbing this with me. Now let's ease into this journey together and see what shifts when you understand the hidden forces shaping your connections. Let's begin. Cheat Code 1. The Halo Effect and Romantic Perception. Let me tell you about something your brain is doing right now without your permission. It's called the halo effect, and it's quietly sabotaging your judgment every time you meet someone new. Back in 1920, psychologist Edward Thorndike discovered something fascinating. He found that when we perceive one positive trait in someone, let's say they're physically attractive, our brain automatically assumes they possess other positive qualities too. They must be trustworthy, probably intelligent, definitely kind. Your brain is essentially saying, well, if they're good at one thing, they're probably good at everything. And here's the thing, this isn't a conscious choice. Your brain does this because it's efficient. Processing contradictory information is mentally expensive. It takes energy to hold the thought that someone can be both charming and unreliable, or both attractive and unkind. So your brain takes a shortcut. It creates a coherent narrative instead. One positive trait bleeds into everything else, coloring your entire perception of that person. The research on this is almost disturbing. Studies have shown that attractive defendants in court cases receive lighter sentences than less attractive ones for the same crimes. Attractive professors get better teaching evaluations even when their actual teaching quality is identical to their less attractive colleagues. Physical attractiveness creates a halo that extends to competence, trustworthiness, intelligence, everything. So how do you actually use this? First, lead with your strongest genuine quality in early interactions. If you're naturally funny, let that shine first. If you're deeply knowledgeable about something, share that passion early. If you're warm and empathetic, let people feel that immediately. Whatever your strongest trait is, that's the first brushstroke of the painting your brain is creating for them. And once that halo is established, they'll interpret everything else about you more generously. But here's where it gets more important. You need to use this knowledge defensively too. When you're evaluating potential partners, actively look past surface impressions. That person who made you laugh within the first 5 minutes? Great. But don't let that charm cast a halo over red flags you'd normally notice. That incredibly attractive person who lights up the room? Wonderful. But assess their character independently of their looks. The biggest mistake people make with the halo effect is assuming someone is perfect across all dimensions because they excel in one area. You meet someone who's successful in their career, and suddenly you're assuming they'll be emotionally available, good at communication, aligned with your values. But those things don't actually connect. Professional success doesn't predict relationship skills. Physical attraction doesn't predict emotional compatibility. So catch yourself. When you find yourself thinking, they're so attractive, they must be. Stop. When you notice yourself assuming, they're so successful, they probably. Pause. Your brain is taking shortcuts. And in early dating, those shortcuts can lead you straight into situations that look nothing like what you thought you were getting into. Cheat Code 2. The Pratfall Effect. Why vulnerability creates attraction. Now, let's talk about something that probably goes against everything you've been told about making a good first impression. It's called the Pratfall effect, and it explains why showing your flaws actually makes you more attractive. Elliot Aronson discovered this in the 1960s through a brilliant experiment. He had people listen to recordings of someone answering quiz questions. In some recordings, the person was competent. They got most answers right. In others, they were average. But here's where it gets interesting. In some versions, the competent person spilled coffee on themselves at the end and made embarrassed sounds. And this is what Aronson found. The competent person who made the mistake became significantly more likable than the competent person who didn't make any mistakes. But, and this is crucial, when the average person made the same mistake, they became less likable. The pratfall only works when baseline competence is already established. Why does this happen? Because perfection is intimidating. When someone seems flawless, there's a distance between you and them. They're up there, you're down here. But when a competent person shows vulnerability, spills something, mispronounces a word, admits they don't know something, it closes that gap. It makes them human, approachable, real. In today's world of carefully curated Instagram profiles and dating app photos where everyone is filtered and perfectly posed, authenticity is magnetic. Vulnerability signals that you're not performing. You're not trying so hard to impress that you've erased your humanity. So here's how you apply this. Share a genuine small embarrassment or mistake early on. Not something devastating. You're not trauma dumping on a first date, but something real. You spilled coffee on yourself this morning. You completely blanked on someone's name at work. You tried to cook something new and it was a disaster. These small admissions of imperfection actually make you more attractive, not less. Admit when you don't know something rather than bluffing. If they mention a book you haven't read, a place you haven't been, a concept you're unfamiliar with, just say so. I haven't read that, but it sounds interesting. What did you think of it? This confidence in your gaps is far more attractive than pretending to know everything. And show you can laugh at yourself. Not in a self-deprecating way that becomes your entire personality, but in a way that shows you don't take yourself so seriously that every mistake is a crisis. But here's the mistake people make. They confuse strategic vulnerability with constant apologizing or neediness. That's not the pratfall effect. That's just insecurity. The pratfall effect works because it's a competent person showing one moment of imperfection. It's the exception, not the rule. If you're constantly messing up and constantly apologizing, you're just the average person in Aronson's study, and those people became less attractive after mistakes, not more. Cheat code 3. The mere exposure effect and proximity. Here's something that might change how you think about building attraction. Familiarity breeds affection. It's called the mere exposure effect, and it was discovered by Robert Zeigarnik in the 1960s. Zeigarnik found that repeated exposure to something, anything, really, increases our positive feelings toward it. He played people nonsense words, random shapes, even meaningless symbols. The more times people saw or heard them, the more they liked them. Even when they couldn't consciously remember seeing them before, their affection increased with exposure. Why does this work? Because familiarity signals safety to your amygdala, the part of your brain that's constantly scanning for threats. Novel things require processing. Is this dangerous? Should I be worried? But familiar things? Your brain has already decided they're safe. And that safety translates into positive feelings. This is why workplace romances are so incredibly common. It's why friend-to-lover transitions happen all the time. It's not just convenience or proximity. It's your brain literally growing fonder with repeated exposure. So here's the practical application. In the early stages of getting to know someone, frequent brief interactions beat occasional long ones. This is counterintuitive, right? You'd think one long, deep conversation would be better than 5 short ones. But neurologically, those 5 exposures are creating more positive association than one extended period. Maintain a consistent, not excessive, presence in someone's life through various channels. Maybe you run into them at a coffee shop. Maybe you text them something funny. Maybe you see them at a social event. Maybe you send them an article they'd like. Each of these is an exposure. Each one is your brain's algorithm updating. Familiar, safe, positive. But here's the critical distinction. The exposure must be positive or neutral. If every interaction is negative or stressful or annoying, you're not building attraction. You're building aversion. Quantity doesn't override quality here. And there's a ceiling. The mere exposure effect plateaus around 10 to 20 exposures. After that, you're not getting additional benefit from sheer frequency. And if you push beyond that without deepening the connection, you can actually reverse the effect. This is where you cross from "I enjoy seeing them" to "why are they everywhere?" The mistake people make is confusing quantity with quality. They think, "I'll just be around them all the time and they'll eventually like me." But overexposure without substance becomes irritating. You become background noise, or worse, you become the person who won't take a hint. Cheat code 4, the Benjamin Franklin effect, asking for small favors. This one is delightfully counterintuitive. You'd think doing favors for someone makes them like you more, right? But it's actually the opposite. When someone does a favor for you, they grow to like you more. This is called the Benjamin Franklin effect, and yes, it's named after that Benjamin Franklin. He actually used this technique to win over a rival who disliked him. Instead of trying to impress the guy or do favors for him, Franklin asked to borrow a rare book from the man's library. The rival sent it. Franklin returned it promptly with a very gracious thank you note. And from that point on, the rival was friendly toward him. Franklin wrote, "He that has once done you a kindness will be more ready to do you another than he whom you yourself have obliged." Why does this work? Cognitive dissonance. When someone helps you, their brain needs to justify why they did that. And the easiest justification is, "I must like this person. I must think they're worthy of my time and effort. Otherwise, why would I have helped them?" It's your brain creating internal consistency. I'm not the kind of person who helps people I don't like or respect. Therefore, if I help them, I must like and respect them. And once your brain has made that decision, it looks for evidence to support it. So here's how you apply this. Ask for small, specific favors, not big impositions. "Can you help me move this weekend?" is too much too soon. But small things. "Do you have a restaurant recommendation for this neighborhood? Could I borrow a book you mentioned? What's your opinion on this choice I'm trying to make?" The key is that the favor has to feel meaningful but not burdensome. It needs to be something where they actually have to think for a moment and offer something of value. Their knowledge, their taste, their perspective. But it can't be so big that it feels like you're taking advantage. And then, this is important. Express genuine appreciation that acknowledges their specific effort. Not just "thanks," but "thank you for taking the time to think about that. Your perspective really helped me see it differently." You're reinforcing the positive feeling they're getting from helping you. You're creating opportunities for them to invest small amounts of time or energy into you. And each small investment makes their brain more committed to the narrative that you're someone worth investing in. The mistakes people make here are asking for significant favors too early in the relationship, which feels presumptuous and kills attraction. Or asking for favors but never reciprocating, which just makes you seem like a taker. The Benjamin Franklin effect isn't a license to use people. It's a psychological principle about how small acts of service create affection. Use it to invite connection, not to exploit kindness. Cheat code 5. Similarity-Attraction paradigm versus complementarity. You've probably heard the phrase, "opposites attract." And you've also heard, "birds of a feather flock together." So which is it? The answer is, both, but in very specific ways. And understanding the difference might be the most important thing you learn about choosing a compatible partner. Back in the 1970s, psychologist Don Byrne conducted extensive research on what predicts attraction. He found something remarkably consistent. Similarity in attitudes is one of the strongest predictors of initial attraction. When someone shares your views on things that matter to you, your brain experiences less cognitive dissonance. There's no internal conflict. Everything flows smoothly. You feel understood, validated, like you've found someone who sees the world the way you do. But here's where it gets more nuanced. While similarity predicts attraction, functional complementarity predicts long-term relationship success. What does that mean? It means that having different traits that work well together, that complement each other, actually creates a stronger partnership than being identical. Think about it this way. If you're both highly spontaneous, who's making sure you don't miss your flight? If you're both extreme planners, who's reminding you to actually enjoy the moment? Complementary differences create interdependence. You fill each other's gaps. You become stronger together than you are separately. So here's how you actually apply this distinction. Prioritize alignment on core values over surface interests. It doesn't matter if you both like hiking or if one of you has never set foot on a trail. What matters is whether you share values about family, ambition, lifestyle, money, personal growth, how you want to spend your time on Earth. Someone who shares your passion for indie films but has completely different values about honesty or commitment. That's not compatibility. That's just shared taste. But someone who shares your core values about building a life, even if they've never watched your favorite movie, that's actual foundation. Learn to recognize when differences are complementary versus when they're incompatible. A planner paired with a spontaneous person? That can be complementary. The planner provides structure and security. The spontaneous person brings adventure and flexibility. They balance each other. But a spender paired with a saver who have fundamentally different values about money and security? That's not complementary. That's a collision course. The issue isn't the behavior. It's the underlying values that drive it. And here's a beautiful application of similarity. Shared unusual interests create what researchers call the special snowflake effect. When you discover that you both love obscure jazz from the 1960s, or you both have a weird fascination with urban planning, or you both collect vintage maps, that creates a sense of unique compatibility. It's not that the interest itself matters that much. It's that finding someone who shares a specific, uncommon passion makes you feel like you've found someone rare, like the universe aligned to bring you together. The biggest mistakes people make here are assuming opposites attract universally, or seeking someone who's identical to themselves. The opposites attract myth causes people to pursue partners who are fundamentally incompatible, thinking the tension is chemistry. It's not. Chemistry is ease with depth, not constant friction. But seeking someone identical is equally problematic. You end up with no complementarity, no growth, just an echo chamber. Research is clear on this. Couples who are similar in attractiveness level, education, and core values have significantly higher satisfaction and lower divorce rates. But within that similarity, having complementary personality traits and strengths creates the interdependence that makes relationships resilient. Cheat Code 6. The Chameleon Effect and Unconscious Mimicry. Your body is having conversations your conscious mind knows nothing about. Right now, if you're sitting with someone you like, you're probably matching their posture without realizing it. If they lean forward, you lean forward. If they cross their legs, you might do the same moments later. This is called the chameleon effect, and it's one of the most powerful unconscious signals of connection. Psychologists Tanya Chartrand and John Bard discovered this in the late 1990s. They found that we unconsciously mimic the posture, speech patterns, facial expressions, and even breathing rhythms of people we like or want to connect with. And here's what's fascinating. This mimicry is both a signal of attraction and a creator of it. Why does this work? Mirror neurons. Your brain has specialized neurons that fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform that action. These neurons create empathy. They help you understand what someone else is experiencing by literally simulating it in your own neural circuitry. When you mirror someone, you're sending an unconscious signal. We're on the same team. We're in sync. We're connected. It's a form of nonverbal communication that says, I'm with you. I'm paying attention to you. You matter to me. So here's the application. Allow subtle matching of energy level and speaking pace. If they're speaking softly and thoughtfully, don't barrel in with high energy. If they're excited and animated, don't stay completely subdued. This isn't about conscious copying. It's about being attuned to their emotional state and meeting them there. But equally important, notice when someone mirrors you. It's an unconscious indicator of interest. If you lean back and they lean back. If you smile and they smile. If you pick up your drink and shortly after they pick up theirs. These aren't coincidences. Their brain is signaling connection. And use shared laughter and synchronized movements to build rapport. When you laugh together, your bodies are literally synchronizing. When you walk in step, when you both reach for something at the same time, when you find yourselves moving together. These moments of physical synchronization create emotional connection. But here's the critical mistake. Conscious, obvious mimicry feels manipulative and breaks connection. If you're sitting there deliberately copying every gesture, it reads as fake. It feels like a tactic. The chameleon effect works because it's unconscious and natural. Here's what's really interesting. People who naturally mimic more are consistently rated as more empathetic and more likable. It's not a manipulation technique. It's actually a measure of your attunement to others. The more naturally you mirror, the more connected people feel to you, because your body is genuinely responding to theirs. Cheat Code 7. The Misattribution of Arousal, Dutton and Aron's Bridge Study. Here's something wild about your brain. It's not actually very good at identifying where your feelings are coming from. And this fact has profound implications for attraction. In 1974, psychologists Donald Dutton and Arthur Aron conducted what's now known as the Bridge Study. And it's one of the most fascinating experiments in relationship psychology. They had an attractive female researcher approach men in 2 different locations. Some men were on a scary, swaying suspension bridge high above a canyon. Others were on a stable, safe bridge close to the ground. The researcher asked the men to complete a quick survey, then gave them her phone number in case they had any questions about the study. Here's what happened. The men who met her on the scary bridge were significantly more likely to call her afterward than the men who met her on the stable bridge. Why? Because their hearts were racing. Their palms were sweaty. Adrenaline was pumping through their systems. And their brains misattributed that physiological arousal as attraction to the woman. Their bodies were saying, "I'm aroused," and their brains concluded, "I must be attracted to this person." This is called the misattribution of arousal, and your brain does this all the time. It struggles to distinguish between adrenaline from fear or excitement and adrenaline from romantic attraction. The physical sensations are remarkably similar. Increased heart rate, shallow breathing, heightened alertness. Your brain feels the arousal first, and then creates a story about why you're feeling it. And if an attractive person is standing in front of you when that arousal hits, your brain often decides they're the cause. So here's the practical application. Plan dates with mild physical arousal. Not terror, you're not trying to traumatize anyone, but activities that get the heart rate up a bit. Hiking, especially trails with beautiful views, or mild challenge. Escape rooms where there's time pressure and problem-solving excitement. Concerts where the music is energizing and the crowd has energy. Light athletic activities like rock climbing, ice skating, or even a competitive arcade game. These environments don't just make the date more fun, they literally amplify attraction through physiological arousal. You're creating a context where their body is naturally producing the same chemicals that attraction produces. But understand this works both ways. Exciting environments amplify existing attraction. If there's already chemistry, these contexts intensify it. But they can also make you feel attracted to someone when the compatibility isn't actually there. This is why vacation romances feel so intense, but often don't survive real life. The arousal from novelty and adventure gets misattributed as deep connection. So recognize when your own feelings might be artificially amplified by context. If you meet someone while traveling, or at a music festival, or during some high-energy experience, be aware that some of what you're feeling is the context, not the person. This doesn't mean the attraction is fake, but it means you need to test it in normal environments too. The biggest mistake is creating artificial arousal without genuine compatibility underneath. The bridge effect can spark initial attraction, but it can't sustain a relationship. If you're using exciting dates to mask fundamental incompatibility, you're just delaying the inevitable. Cheat Code 8. The Zeigarnik effect. The power of unfinished business. Your brain hates unfinished business. Literally. There's a psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect, discovered by Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik in the 1920s, that explains why incomplete tasks create cognitive tension and stick in your memory far more than completed ones. Zeigarnik noticed that waiters could remember complex orders perfectly while they were in progress, but forgot them immediately after the bill was paid. The open loop kept the information active in their minds. Once the loop closed, their brains released it. This happens because your brain naturally loops back to resolve unfinished patterns. It creates anticipation, curiosity, mental engagement. An incomplete task is like a song that stops before the final note. Your mind wants to complete the pattern. And this has everything to do with building attraction. When you end a conversation or date while there's still more to say, while the energy is still high, while they're still curious about something, you're creating a Zeigarnik effect. You're leaving an open loop in their mind that keeps drawing their attention back to you. Here's how you apply this. End conversations and dates on a high note while there's still momentum. This is counterintuitive because when something is going well, you want to extend it. But ending at the peak, when you're both laughing, when the conversation is flowing, when the energy is high, leaves them wanting more. It creates anticipation for the next time. Create conversational cliffhangers naturally. Oh, I have to tell you this story about what happened last week, but it's too long for right now. Remind me next time we talk. You're not being manipulative. You're genuinely leaving something for later. But that unfinished story becomes a thread their mind pulls on. Leave small mysteries about yourself that invite curiosity. Don't lay out your entire biography in the first conversation. When they ask about something, it's okay to give a partial answer that raises more questions. Yeah, I lived abroad for a few years. It completely changed how I see things. You've answered, but you've also opened doors to more questions. What country? Why did you go? How did it change you? But here's the critical balance. This must be coupled with reliability. The Zeigarnik effect works when the brain believes the loop will eventually close. If you constantly create cliffhangers but never follow through, if you promise stories but never tell them, if you hint at depth but never reveal it, you don't seem intriguing. You seem flaky, or like you're playing games. The common mistake is being intentionally withholding rather than naturally intriguing. There's a difference between strategic incompleteness and emotional unavailability. One invites curiosity, the other creates frustration. Think of it this way. You're writing a great novel, and you're ending each chapter at a compelling moment. But you are writing the next chapter. You're not just a series of cliffhangers with no substance behind them. Cheat Code 9, Self-Expansion Theory, Aron's Model of Love. Here's a question that might change how you think about attraction. What does this person add to my life? Not just in terms of comfort or validation, but in terms of expansion. Do they make your world bigger? Psychologist Aron developed self-expansion theory, and it's one of the most elegant models for understanding why we're drawn to certain people. The core idea is this. We're attracted to people who expand our sense of self by introducing new perspectives, experiences, and identities. When someone shows you a new way of thinking, teaches you a skill you didn't have, introduces you to music or art or ideas that reshape how you see the world, your brain rewards that with dopamine. Expansion literally feels like personal growth. It's exhilarating, and your brain starts associating that person with growth, possibility, becoming more than you currently are. This is why early relationships feel so intoxicating. The person is new. Their world is new. Every conversation reveals something you didn't know. You're expanding rapidly, and that expansion is genuinely attractive. So here's the application. Share your unique knowledge, hobbies, or perspectives generously. Don't hold back the things that make you interesting because you're worried they're too niche or weird. If you're passionate about architecture, share that lens. If you know a lot about wine or philosophy or urban ecology or graphic novels, share it. You're not lecturing. You're inviting someone into a part of the world they might not have access to without you. Be genuinely curious about their world and willing to try new things they value. If they love something you've never tried, try it. If they have a perspective that's foreign to you, explore it. This isn't about losing yourself. It's about expanding yourself through their experience. And create experiences together that neither of you have done before. Novel, challenging activities together create shared expansion. You're both growing, both stepping outside your comfort zones, both becoming more together than you were separately. Research consistently shows that couples who regularly engage in novel, challenging activities together report significantly higher relationship satisfaction. But here's the balance. You can't force constant novelty. That becomes exhausting. Some people make the mistake of staying too comfortable. They stop expanding, stop bringing new things to the relationship, stop growing. The relationship becomes stagnant. But others make the opposite mistake. They're constantly pushing for the next adventure, the next new thing, never allowing depth or integration. That's not expansion. That's just stimulation seeking. True self-expansion is about genuine growth, not just novelty for its own sake. It's about becoming more dimensional, more capable, more understanding. It's about the person pulling more out of you than you knew was there. Cheat Code 10. The reciprocity of liking, but strategic ambiguity. We like people who like us. This is one of the most robust findings in social psychology. When you know someone is into you, it's validating, it's flattering, and it often triggers reciprocal feelings. But here's the twist. Uncertainty about whether someone likes you can actually increase attraction. Not complete uncertainty. If you think someone definitely doesn't like you, that kills attraction. But that middle zone, where you think they might like you, where you're not quite sure how they feel, that's where attraction intensifies. Why? Because certain interest gets processed and filed away. Your brain says, okay, they like me, got it, and moves on. But uncertain interest keeps your mind engaged. You find yourself thinking about them more, analyzing their behavior, wondering what they meant by that comment, replaying conversations looking for clues. This is why the hard-to-get strategy has some truth to it, but it's wildly misunderstood. The effective version isn't being cold or distant or playing manipulative games. It's showing genuine interest while allowing natural variation in your responsiveness. Here's how you actually apply this. Show genuine interest through attention and questions. Be present when you're with them. Ask follow-up questions. Remember details they've shared. Make it clear you enjoy their company. This establishes the foundation. They know you like them enough to engage. But allow natural variation in your responsiveness. Sometimes you text back quickly. Sometimes it takes a few hours because you were genuinely busy. Sometimes you're very warm. Sometimes you're a bit more subdued because that's just your mood that day. You're not calculating this. You're just being authentically variable like actual humans are. Let them wonder occasionally about how you feel without being coldly distant. Maybe you don't declare your feelings immediately. Maybe you maintain some privacy about your inner world. Maybe you're genuinely not sure yourself yet, and that genuine uncertainty is attractive. The mistake is being completely transparent too early, which removes all mystery, or playing hard to get with no warmth, which just seems like disinterest. Real strategic ambiguity is warmth plus mystery. It's, I like you and I'm genuinely engaged combined with, but I'm not completely available or certain yet. And here's the crucial nuance. This works best in early stages. Once you're in an actual relationship, reliable emotional availability becomes far more important than mystery. Long-term partnerships need security, not constant uncertainty about where you stand. Cheat Code 11. The Pygmalion Effect. Expectations shaping reality. There's something almost magical about expectations. Robert Rosenthal discovered this in education. When teachers were told certain students were bloomers who would show rapid intellectual growth, those students actually did show more growth, even though they were randomly selected. The teacher's expectations literally shaped the student's performance. This is called the Pygmalion effect, and it works in romantic relationships too. When you genuinely believe someone is special, when you hold high regard for their character and potential, they're more likely to actually become that way around you. Why does this work? Behavioral confirmation. You unconsciously elicit behaviors you expect through subtle cues. If you expect someone to be thoughtful, you notice and respond positively to their thoughtful actions, which reinforces those behaviors. If you expect them to be funny, you laugh more genuinely at their humor, which encourages more of it. Your expectations create a reality through tiny feedback loops. The way you look at them, the way you respond to them, what you notice and what you ignore, all of it shapes how they show up in the relationship. So here's the application. Genuinely hold high regard for your partner's potential and character. Not false positivity. You can't just decide someone incompatible is perfect. But when you're with someone who has real positive qualities, see those qualities. Believe in them. Frame their actions in the most generous light when ambiguous. If they do something that could be interpreted multiple ways, choose the interpretation that assumes good intentions. Most of the time, that generous interpretation is actually correct. And verbalize your positive expectations. You always know how to make me laugh. I love how thoughtful you are. You have such an interesting way of seeing things. These aren't empty compliments. They're reflections of who you genuinely see them as. And hearing that makes them more likely to embody it. But the common mistakes are real. False positivity about fundamentally incompatible partners, or having impossibly high standards that no one could meet. The Pygmalion effect works when your high expectations are grounded in reality and achievable. And here's the shadow side. This works negatively too. If you expect someone to disappoint you, to let you down, to not care, you'll unconsciously elicit those behaviors. Your skepticism becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Cheat Code 12, the peak-end rule in dating experiences. Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize partly for discovering something that changes how we should think about dates. We don't actually remember experiences accurately. We remember them through two specific lenses, the peak moment and the ending. The peak-end rule states that we judge experiences based primarily on how we felt at the most intense moment and how we felt at the end. The overall average of the experience matters much less than you'd think. Kahneman demonstrated this with a fascinating study involving colonoscopies. Patients who had a longer procedure but with a less painful ending rated the experience as better than patients who had a shorter procedure with a more painful ending. The memory was shaped by the peak and the end, not the total amount of discomfort. This applies directly to dating. You could have a date where the middle portion is mediocre. Maybe the restaurant is crowded and loud. Maybe there's an awkward lull in conversation. But if there's one moment where you both laugh until you cry, and the ending is warm and connected, that date will be remembered positively. So here's how you apply this. Ensure dates end on a high note even if the middle was mediocre. If things have been a bit flat, find a way to create an emotional upswing before you part. End with warmth, with laughter, with a meaningful moment. Create at least one memorable peak moment per interaction. This could be a deep laugh, a touching story, a moment of shared awe looking at a sunset, an unexpected adventure you stumble into. Something that spikes the emotional intensity in a positive way. And when conflicts occur, prioritize how you resolve and end them. The fight itself might be messy, but if you end on genuine repair and connection, that's what will be remembered. The peak-end rule applies to arguments too. The common mistake is letting dates fade out awkwardly. You've had a great time, and then the end becomes about logistics. Okay, well, I should probably get going. Yeah, I'll text you about Tuesday. Cool, see you later. All the emotional momentum drains out, and that flat ending becomes what they remember. Instead, end with emotional connection, not logistics. This was exactly what I needed tonight. Beats, see you later. I'm really glad we did this. Beats, we should do this again sometime. Create an emotional punctuation mark, not just a logistical conclusion. Your date might forget half of what you talked about, but they'll remember how they felt at the best moment and how they felt when they walked away. Make those two moments count. Cheat Code 13, the Scarcity Principle and Perceived Value. Robert Cialdini's research on influence reveals something fundamental about human psychology. We value things more when they're scarce. Limited availability increases perceived value. This is why only 2 left in stock works on shopping sites. Why limited edition items sell out. Why exclusive invitations feel more appealing than open ones. And whether we like it or not, this applies to romantic attraction too. When someone seems highly available, constantly free, with a life that appears to revolve around dating or specifically around you, the perceived value drops. When someone has a full life, clear boundaries, selective availability, the perceived value increases. Why does this work? 2 psychological mechanisms. First, loss aversion. We're more motivated by the fear of losing something than by the prospect of gaining it. When someone is scarce, we're more aware we might lose access to them. Second, competitive instincts activate. When something is in limited supply, we unconsciously compete for it, which increases our desire. But here's where this gets ethically tricky. So let me be very clear. There's a massive difference between artificial scarcity and genuine scarcity. Artificial scarcity is playing hard to get. It's making yourself unavailable strategically. It's manufacturing competition or misleading someone about your availability. It's waiting exactly 47 minutes to text back because you read some dating advice that said never respond right away. That's manipulation, and it's exhausting for everyone involved. Genuine scarcity is having a real, full life that doesn't revolve around dating. It's having friendships you prioritize, work you care about, hobbies that fulfill you, goals you're pursuing. It's being selectively available because you genuinely have other meaningful things happening in your life. So here's the application. Maintain a full, genuine life. Don't make dating or any one person the center of your existence. When you have other things you value, when you have boundaries around your time and energy, when you're genuinely sometimes unavailable because you're living your life, that creates natural scarcity. And that natural scarcity is attractive because it signals that you're a complete person, not someone waiting around for external validation. Be selectively available without playing manipulative games. If you're free and you want to see someone, see them. If you're genuinely busy or need alone time, say so. Don't manufacture unavailability, but don't abandon your life either. Understand that mystery and boundaries increase intrigue. You don't have to share everything immediately. You don't have to be available at all times. Having parts of yourself that remain private, having time that's yours alone, these aren't barriers to intimacy. They're part of being a dimensional person with depth. The ethical consideration here is crucial. Never manufacture competition or mislead about your availability. Don't casually mention other people you're seeing just to make someone jealous. Don't pretend you're busier than you are. Don't play games with people's emotions. The scarcity principle works best when it's not a strategy at all, when it's just the natural result of you having a life worth living. Cheat Code 14. Active Constructive Responding. Gable's 4 response styles. Here's a moment that reveals everything about a relationship. Your partner comes home excited about something good that happened. Maybe they got a compliment at work, or they finished a project they're proud of, or they had a great conversation with an old friend. How you respond in that moment matters more than you probably realize. Psychologist Shelley Gable identified 4 distinct ways people respond to good news, and only one of them actually builds intimacy and relationship satisfaction. Let me walk you through all 4 so you can recognize which one you default to. Active constructive is the gold standard. This is enthusiastic engagement with elaborative questions. That's amazing. Tell me more about how it happened. What did they say exactly? How did you feel? You're matching or exceeding their enthusiasm, asking questions that show genuine curiosity, helping them relive and amplify the positive experience. Passive constructive is supportive but low energy. That's nice, honey. You're not being negative, but you're not really engaging either. It's acknowledgement without enthusiasm. Active destructive is when you undermine the good news with concerns or reality checks. Are you sure you're ready for that responsibility? That sounds like it'll be a lot of extra work. What if it doesn't work out? You think you're being helpful or realistic, but what you're actually doing is deflating their joy. Passive destructive is ignoring the news or changing the subject. They tell you something good and you say, "Yeah, cool. Hey, did you remember to pick up milk?" You're not even acknowledging what they shared. Here's what Gable's research found. Only active constructive responding predicts relationship satisfaction and longevity. The other 3 patterns, even passive constructive, which seems harmless, actually correlate with relationship decline. Why does this work? Because active constructive responses validate and amplify joy. When someone shares good news, they're not just giving you information. They're inviting you to celebrate with them. They're offering you a moment of connection through shared positive emotion. When you respond with genuine enthusiasm, you're saying, "Your joy matters to me. Your wins are my wins. I'm on your team." And there's a neurological component here too. Positive emotions are amplified when they're shared and validated. Your enthusiastic response literally makes their good experience better in retrospect. You become associated with the expansion of their positive feelings. So here's the application. Match or exceed their enthusiasm when they share wins. If they're excited, you be excited. Don't modulate it down to what feels comfortable for you. Meet them at their energy level. Ask follow-up questions that show genuine curiosity. Don't just say that's great and move on. Dig in. Get details. Help them tell the story. What happened next? How did you pull that off? What was the best part? And celebrate small victories, not just major milestones. This isn't just for promotions or huge achievements. It's for the small things too. They made someone laugh. They figured out a tricky problem. They had a good workout. They saw something beautiful on their walk. These micro moments of joy deserve active constructive responses too. The common mistake is only being present for problems. Some people are excellent at showing up when their partner is struggling, offering comfort and support during difficult times, but then minimally engaged when things are going well. But research shows that how you respond to good news is actually a stronger predictor of relationship quality than how you respond to bad news. And never undermine good news with reality checks. Your partner knows the potential downsides. They've thought about the complications. In the moment they're sharing their joy, they don't need you to be the voice of caution. They need you to be the voice of celebration. Cheat code 15. The Gottman ratio, 5-to-1 positive to negative interactions. John Gottman is probably the most famous relationship researcher alive, and for good reason. He can observe a couple for 15 minutes and predict with over 90% accuracy whether they'll divorce. One of his most important findings is what's called the Gottman ratio, and it's simpler than you might think. Stable, happy relationships maintain at least 5 positive interactions for every negative one. 5-to-1. That's the magic ratio. Why does this specific ratio matter? Because of negativity bias. Negative experiences have 3 to 5 times more psychological weight than positive ones. This is hardwired into us evolutionarily. Remembering threats and dangers was more important for survival than remembering pleasant experiences. Your brain is literally built to weight negative interactions more heavily. So one criticism doesn't cancel out one compliment. One harsh comment doesn't get balanced by one kind gesture. You need approximately 5 deposits in the emotional bank account to counteract one withdrawal. Think about what this means practically. If you have a fight, even a minor one where you're snippy or dismissive, you need to make 5 positive interactions to get back to baseline. Not to get ahead, just to neutralize the negativity. Here's the application. Regularly deposit into the emotional bank account with small kindnesses. A genuine compliment. A moment of appreciation. A touch on their shoulder as you walk by. Making their coffee the way they like it. Sending a text that says you're thinking about them. These small positive interactions are the deposits that keep your ratio healthy. Don't let a ratio deficit build up. If you've been stressed and short-tempered, if you've been distant or critical, if there have been several negative interactions, you need to consciously course correct. Address the neglect before it turns into resentment. You can't just wait for things to blow over. You need to actively rebuild the positive balance. And during conflicts, consciously include positive remarks and appreciation even while addressing the problem. I'm frustrated about this issue, but I want you to know I appreciate that you're willing to talk about it. This is hard to discuss, and I love that we can have difficult conversations. These positive elements during negative interactions reduce the damage. The common mistake is thinking neutral interactions count as positive. They don't. Coexisting in the same space watching TV isn't a positive interaction. Discussing logistics about who's picking up groceries isn't positive. These are neutral. Positive interactions require actual positive emotional content. Affection, appreciation, humor, interest, support. Gottman's research is so precise because he literally codes interactions in his lab. He watches couples discuss conflicts and tallies positive and negative moments. Couples below the 5-to-1 ratio almost inevitably head toward divorce. Couples at or above it stay together and report satisfaction. Cheat code 16, Stonewalling and the demand withdrawal pattern. Let me describe a pattern you've probably either experienced or witnessed. One person wants to talk about an issue. They're pursuing, trying to engage, asking questions, maybe getting increasingly intense. The other person is shutting down, getting quieter, withdrawing, maybe eventually just leaving the room or refusing to engage at all. This is called the demand-withdraw pattern, and the withdrawal piece, what Gottman calls stonewalling, is one of the four horsemen of relationship apocalypse. It's one of the most toxic patterns a relationship can fall into. But here's what's important to understand. Stonewalling isn't usually malicious. It's physiological overwhelm. When your heart rate exceeds about 100 beats per minute during conflict, your body enters fight or flight mode. Blood flow shifts away from your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking, empathy, and nuanced conversation, and toward your muscles, preparing you to fight or flee. In this state, constructive conversation becomes literally neurologically impossible. You can't process what your partner is saying. You can't access empathy. You can't think clearly. Your brain has decided this is a threat situation and it's in survival mode. Stonewalling is often an attempt at self-regulation. The person is so flooded with stress hormones that they shut down to avoid saying something damaging or escalating further. But here's the problem. To the pursuing partner, withdrawal feels like abandonment, like their concerns don't matter, like their partner doesn't care. So they intensify their pursuit, which increases the other person's overwhelm, which increases withdrawal, and the cycle spirals. Here's the application. Recognize your own flooding symptoms. Do you feel defensive, like everything is an attack? Can you not really hear what your partner is saying anymore, just waiting for them to stop talking? Does your chest feel tight, your face hot? Are you thinking about how to escape the conversation? These are signs you're flooded. When you recognize flooding, in yourself or your partner, call for a break. Minimum 20 minutes. That's not arbitrary. It takes at least 20 minutes for your cardiovascular system to return to baseline after a stress response. A 5-minute break doesn't cut it. You need real physiological reset time. During the break, actually soothe yourself. Don't spend 20 minutes rehearsing your arguments or building your case. Go for a walk. Do breathing exercises. Splash cold water on your face. Listen to calming music. Your goal is to get your nervous system back to a state where rational conversation is possible. And if you're the pursuing partner, understand that withdrawal isn't always malicious or a sign they don't care. It's often self-regulation. When your partner starts to withdraw, that's your signal to dial down the intensity, not ramp it up. The common mistake is the pursuing partner intensifying when their partner withdraws, which is understandable. You're scared of the distance, you want resolution, you interpret withdrawal as not caring. But intensification, when someone is already overwhelmed, just pushes them further into shutdown. Here's a gender note that's worth mentioning. Historically, research showed men stonewalled more than women. But more recent research suggests this is less gender-specific than previously thought. It's more about who has lower tolerance for physiological arousal during conflict, and that varies by individual. Cheat Code 17. The fundamental attribution error in relationships. Your partner snaps at you. They're short, maybe dismissive, clearly irritated. What's your first thought? If you're like most people, it's something like, why are they being so moody? Or they're always so sensitive? Or what's their problem? Now flip it. You snap at your partner. You're short, maybe dismissive, clearly irritated. What's your explanation? Probably something like, I had a terrible day at work, or I'm exhausted, or I haven't eaten and I'm just hangry. This is the fundamental attribution error, and it's one of the most destructive patterns in relationships. We attribute our own negative behaviors to circumstances, situational factors, but we attribute our partner's negative behaviors to their character, dispositional factors. Why does this happen? It's called actor-observer bias. You have complete access to your own situational constraints. You know you had a bad day, you're stressed about money, you didn't sleep well, you're worried about your friend who's sick. All of that context is available to you when you evaluate your own behavior. But when you observe your partner's behavior, all you see is the behavior itself. You don't have the same visceral access to their inner state, their stress, their context. So your brain defaults to assuming their behavior reflects who they are rather than what they're dealing with. Here's the application. When your partner is short with you, consider their day before assuming it's about you or their character. Did they mention stress at work? Are they dealing with family issues? Are they tired, hungry, overwhelmed? Practice what's called generous interpretation. Assume good intentions and difficult circumstances in ambiguous situations. And when you mess up, yes, explain your context, but also accept responsibility. I'm sorry I snapped at you. I had a really frustrating day and I took it out on you, which wasn't fair. You're providing situational context without absolving yourself of responsibility for impact. The common mistake is consistently making dispositional attributions about your partner while claiming situational causes for yourself. They're inconsiderate versus, I was just distracted. They're oversensitive versus, I was just stressed. This asymmetry breeds resentment faster than almost anything else in relationships. Because here's what happens. Over time, these attributions calcify into your narrative about who your partner is. One instance of them forgetting something becomes, they're forgetful. A few moments of irritability becomes, they're moody. You stop seeing circumstances and start seeing character flaws. And the really insidious part is that once you've created this narrative, confirmation bias kicks in. You start looking for evidence that confirms your belief. You remember the times they forgot things and forget the times they remembered. You notice their bad moods and overlook their good ones. The intervention is to actively catch yourself. When you find yourself thinking they always, or they never, or they're just, stop. Ask yourself, what circumstances might explain this behavior? What would I want them to assume about me if I did the same thing? Cheat Code 18. The confirmation bias and relationship narratives. Speaking of narratives, let's talk about how your brain creates stories about your relationship and your partner, and then selectively gathers evidence to support those stories. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms your existing beliefs. It's cognitive efficiency at work. Updating your beliefs is mentally expensive, so your brain resists it. Once you've decided something is true, you unconsciously filter information to support that conclusion. In relationships, this shows up as the stories you tell yourself. My partner doesn't listen to me. They don't appreciate what I do. They're not romantic. They're critical. Once you've formed these beliefs, your brain becomes an evidence-gathering machine, but only for one side. Your partner forgets to do something you asked. That confirms they don't listen. They do remember. That was just an exception. They don't plan a surprise. Confirms they're not romantic. They do plan something special. You minimize it. Well, I basically had to ask for it. Here's the application. Actively look for evidence that contradicts the negative narratives you're building. If you believe your partner doesn't appreciate you, specifically look for moments where they do show appreciation. Write them down if you have to. Force your brain to process the counter-evidence. Notice when you're cherry-picking examples to support a complaint. When you find yourself thinking they always. Collect actual data. How many times did this actually happen versus how many times did it not happen? You'll often find your always is actually sometimes, or even a few specific times that stuck in my memory. Regularly reassess your story about who your partner is. People change. Circumstances change. Your partner from 5 years ago isn't exactly the same person today. Are you relating to who they actually are now, or are you relating to your outdated narrative about them? The common mistake is turning one-time behaviors into perceived character traits. They were late once. You're always late. They criticized something. You're so critical. They didn't want to socialize one weekend. You never want to go out. These generalizations feel true in the moment, but they're distortions. Here's a powerful intervention. Write down counterexamples to your negative beliefs. If you believe your partner isn't affectionate, write down every instance of affection you notice over a week. If you believe they don't contribute equally, track what they actually do. Often, you'll discover your belief doesn't match reality. And discuss perception differences directly. I feel like I'm always the one who initiates plans. Is that how you see it? Sometimes you'll learn your partner has a completely different perception, which reveals the confirmation bias at work in both of you. Cheat Code 19. Emotional contagion and regulation. Emotions are contagious. This isn't a metaphor, it's neuroscience. Elaine Hatfield's research on emotional contagion shows that emotions literally spread between people through unconscious mimicry of facial expressions, body language, and vocal patterns. When you're around someone who's anxious, you tend to become more anxious. When you're around someone who's calm, you tend to become calmer. This happens through mirror neurons and through autonomic nervous system synchronization. Your heart rate, your breathing, your stress hormone levels. All of these actually synchronize with the people you're close to over time. Research on couples shows their heart rates and cortisol levels literally sync up, especially when they're emotionally connected. You're not just metaphorically affected by your partner's moods, you're physiologically affected. Here's the application. Your calm can literally regulate an anxious partner, and vice versa. If your partner is spiraling into anxiety or anger, your regulated nervous system can help bring them back to baseline. This isn't about being emotionally distant. It's about being a calming presence. Slow your breathing. Keep your voice steady and warm. Stay grounded in your body. Be mindful of bringing external stress into the relationship space. When you come home stressed from work, your partner will absorb that stress. That doesn't mean you can't share your day or be authentic about how you're feeling, but be conscious that your emotional state impacts them. Use your own emotional state strategically to shift the interaction tone. If things are getting tense, you can consciously shift toward calm or warmth or playfulness, and that shift will influence the dynamic between you. The common mistake is expecting to maintain your mood in isolation. I'm in a good mood, and I'm not going to let their bad mood affect me. That's a nice thought, but it's neurologically unrealistic. You will be affected. The question is whether you're consciously working with emotional contagion or just unconsciously absorbing whatever comes at you. And the flip side, not recognizing you're absorbing your partner's emotions. You might think you're upset about something specific, when actually you're just picking up on their underlying anxiety or frustration. Cheat Code 20. The Ikea Effect. Effort Justification in Relationships. Here's something fascinating. Research shows that people value things more when they've put effort into creating them, even if the result is objectively mediocre. Michael Norton, Daniel Moshon, and Dan Ariely demonstrated this with IKEA furniture. People valued their self-assembled furniture more than identical professionally assembled pieces. This is called the IKEA effect, and it's driven by cognitive dissonance. Your brain needs to justify the effort you've invested, so it increases the perceived value of whatever you created. This applies powerfully to relationships. When you build things together, projects, experiences, inside jokes, shared memories, you both invest effort, which increases your valuation of the relationship itself. Here's the application: build things together. Not just physical things, though that too, but projects, experiences, inside jokes that develop over time. Create a playlist together. Cook elaborate meals together. Build furniture, yes, but also build narratives, shared language, rituals that are unique to your relationship. Understand that overcoming challenges together often strengthens bonds. This is the IKEA effect at work. When you work through something difficult, moving, planning a trip with complications, supporting each other through a tough period, the effort invested makes you both more committed. But here's the critical balance. Recognize when you're staying due to sunk cost rather than current value. The IKEA effect can keep you in relationships that aren't actually working. We've been together for 5 years. We've been through so much. I've invested so much effort. But investment alone doesn't equal compatibility. The common mistake is confusing investment with compatibility, staying because you've tried so hard, not because the relationship actually works. Effort should enhance an already good relationship, not be the sole reason for its existence. If you find yourself thinking, "But I've put so much into this," pause. Are you valuing the relationship because it's genuinely fulfilling, or are you valuing it because walking away would mean all that effort was wasted? The IKEA effect tricks you into overvaluing things you've invested in, even when they're not actually serving you. Cheat Code 21. Validation versus agreement. The crucial distinction. Here's a distinction that could transform your relationship. You can validate someone's emotions without agreeing with their conclusions or actions. Most people don't understand this. They think being supportive means agreeing. It doesn't. Validation means acknowledging that someone's emotions make sense given their perspective and experience. Agreement means endorsing their interpretation or their response. These are completely different things. Here's what validation sounds like. I can see why you'd feel that way given your experience. That makes sense that you're upset about that. I understand why this is hard for you. Here's what invalidation sounds like. You shouldn't feel that way. You're overreacting. That doesn't make any sense. Just get over it. Why does validation work? Because validation meets the fundamental need to be understood. When someone shares their feelings, they're rarely asking you to fix the problem or even agree with them. They're asking you to acknowledge their internal reality. Agreement addresses content, but can feel dismissive of emotions. If your partner is upset and you immediately jump to, "You're right, that person was totally wrong," you're agreeing with their assessment, but you might be missing the emotional validation they need first. Here's the application. Separate emotional acknowledgement from problem solving or debate. First, validate. That sounds really frustrating. I can see why you feel hurt. Then, if appropriate, you can move to problem solving or offer a different perspective. But the validation has to come first. That makes sense that you're upset can be followed by. And also, I wonder if there might be another way to look at it. You've validated the emotion before offering a different perspective. The common mistake is thinking you have to agree to be supportive. You don't. You can completely disagree with someone's interpretation while still validating that their feelings are real and make sense to them. Or the opposite mistake, invalidating feelings while trying to help someone see logic. You're being irrational. If you just think about it logically, this might be trying to help, but it communicates that their emotions are wrong or illegitimate. Research shows that validation is a stronger predictor of relationship satisfaction than actual agreement on issues. Couples who disagree on many things but validate each other's feelings report higher satisfaction than couples who agree on everything but invalidate emotions. Cheat Code 22. Attachment Theory Basics. Secure, Anxious, Avoidant. There's a blueprint for how you love, and it was written in your first relationships. This is attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, and it's one of the most powerful frameworks for understanding your patterns in romantic relationships. Here's the basic idea. The way your caregivers responded to your needs as a child created a template for how you expect relationships to work. That template becomes your attachment style, and it shapes how you handle intimacy, conflict, and connection as an adult. There are three main styles. Secure attachment, which is about 50 to 60% of people. If you're securely attached, you're comfortable with both intimacy and autonomy. You can be close without losing yourself, and you can be independent without feeling disconnected. You trust that people will be there for you, and you don't panic when they need space. Anxious attachment, about 20% of people. If you're anxiously attached, you crave closeness and constantly fear abandonment. You need a lot of reassurance. When your partner pulls back even slightly, you panic. You might text multiple times if they don't respond quickly. You interpret small distance as rejection. Your underlying belief is, "I'm not enough," and they're going to leave. Avoidant attachment, about 25% of people. If you're avoidantly attached, you highly value independence and you're uncomfortable with vulnerability. You withdraw when things get emotionally intense. You might feel suffocated by too much closeness. You prioritize self-reliance and you're suspicious of depending on others. Your underlying belief is, "I can't trust people to be there for me, so I won't need them." Why does this matter? Because attachment isn't destiny, but it creates incredibly predictable patterns in how you communicate, handle conflict, and experience intimacy. Understanding your attachment style and your partner's gives you a roadmap for your relationship dynamics. Here's the application. Identify your own style through self-reflection on past relationships. How do you typically respond when a partner needs space? When they want more closeness? During conflict? When they're upset? Your patterns will reveal your attachment style. Recognize your partner's style through their responses to closeness and distance. Do they lean in or pull back when things get intense? Do they need constant reassurance, or do they seem uncomfortable with too much emotional intimacy? And here's the hopeful part. Secure people can shift insecure partners towards security over time. Consistent, reliable emotional availability from a secure partner actually rewires attachment patterns. It's not instant, but it happens. The common mistake is using attachment as an excuse. I'm just avoidant, that's how I am. No, attachment is a framework for understanding your patterns so you can work with them and grow beyond them. It's not a fixed identity. Attachment styles can change with conscious work and secure relationships. You're not locked into the template from childhood forever. Cheat Code 23, the dependency paradox, the secure base concept. Here's something counterintuitive. Feeling securely dependent on your partner actually increases your autonomy and confidence to take risks in the world. This is called the dependency paradox, and it flies in the face of the cultural narrative that dependency equals weakness. We're told that healthy adults should be completely self-sufficient, that needing someone makes you weak or codependent. But attachment research shows the opposite. When you have a secure base, when you trust that your partner is reliably there for you emotionally, you're actually more adventurous, more confident, more willing to pursue individual goals and take risks. Why does this work? Because the secure base allows for exploration without fear. Think of a toddler with a secure attachment to their parent. They venture away to explore the room, but they regularly check back. Are you still there? When they know their parent is there, they explore more confidently. When they're uncertain about their parent's availability, they stay close and don't explore. Adults work the same way. When you trust your relationship is solid, when you know your partner will be there when you return, you're free to pursue your career ambitions, your friendships, your individual interests without anxiety. The security of the relationship becomes the foundation for individual growth. Here's the application. Provide consistent emotional availability so your partner can pursue individual goals. Don't punish them for independence. Celebrate their individual achievements. Make it clear that their exploration doesn't threaten the relationship. Use your relationship as a secure foundation rather than your entire world. The healthiest relationships are launching pads, not cages. You should feel more capable of taking on the world because you have this relationship, not less capable because you're dependent on it. And understand that healthy dependency isn't the same as neediness. Neediness is, I can't function without you. Healthy dependency is, I'm more myself because I have you as my secure base. The common mistake is equating all dependency with weakness or codependency. There's a massive difference between secure interdependence and anxious clinging. Secure attachment people are very dependent on their partners. They just trust the dependence, so they don't have to be anxiously vigilant about it. Cheat Code 24, vulnerability hangover and trust building. You have a deep conversation with your partner. You share something you've never told anyone. You cry, maybe. You let them see a part of you that you usually keep hidden. In the moment, it feels connecting, intimate, right? Then the next day, you wake up and feel exposed, anxious, regretful, like you shared too much, like maybe they're looking at you differently now. This is what Brené Brown calls the vulnerability hangover. And if you've experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Why does this happen? Because vulnerability feels threatening to your self-protection mechanisms. You've removed armor. You've let someone see parts of you that feel weak or shameful or unacceptable. Even when the person responded beautifully, even when they held your vulnerability with care, your nervous system still sounds the alarm. We're exposed. This is dangerous. Exposure brings temporary shame. Some part of you worries that what you revealed will be used against you, or that they now see you as less than you were before. Here's the application. Expect and normalize vulnerability hangovers in yourself and your partner. When you notice yourself feeling weird or distant the day after deep sharing, recognize it's a hangover. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have shared. It just means your nervous system is processing the exposure. Follow up after deep conversations with reassurance. If your partner shared something vulnerable, reach out the next day. Not with a big production, but with something that says, what you shared doesn't change how I see you, or thank you for trusting me with that. Build vulnerability gradually rather than dumping everything at once. Trust is built in layers. You share something small and see how it's received. Then something slightly deeper. Then deeper still. This progressive vulnerability allows both people to adjust and build confidence in each other's trustworthiness. The common mistake is interpreting your partner's post-vulnerability distance as rejection when it's actually just self-protection. If they seem a bit withdrawn after opening up, don't take it personally. They're processing exposure, not pulling away from you. And vulnerability should be reciprocal and progressively deeper, not one-sided confessions. If you're always the one sharing deeply while your partner remains closed, that's not building intimacy. That's creating imbalance. Cheat Code 25. Bid for Connection Theory. Gottman's turning toward. Relationships aren't built in grand gestures. They're built in tiny moments you might not even notice. Your partner shows you something on their phone. They tell you a small story about their day. They reach for your hand. They sigh heavily. They make a joke. These are all bids for connection. And John Gottman's research shows that how you respond to these bids determines whether your relationship thrives or fails. There are 3 ways to respond to a bid. Turn toward, you engage. They show you a funny video, you watch it and laugh. Turn away, you miss or ignore it. They show you something and you say, uh-huh, without looking up from your phone. Turn against, you actively reject it. They tell you about their day and you respond with criticism or annoyance. Gottman found that relationships are built on hundreds of these small bids every single day. And the couples who stay together respond positively, turn toward, at least 80 to 86% of the time. The couples who divorce, they turn toward only about 33% of the time. This is how trust is built, not in the big moments, but in the accumulation of small moments where you show up for each other. These micro-connections create what Gottman calls emotional accessibility. Your partner learns whether you're someone they can reach for, whether their bids will be met or rejected. Here's the application. Notice when your partner makes small bids. They show you something. That's a bid for shared attention. They tell you a minor story. That's a bid for interest. They seek physical touch. That's a bid for connection. They're irritable or sigh heavily. That's a bid for support or comfort. Put down your phone and turn toward at least 80% of bids. You don't have to respond perfectly to every single bid. That's unrealistic. But you need to respond positively to the vast majority. When you miss too many, disconnection accumulates. And make your own bids clearly rather than expecting mind reading. If you want connection, reach for it. Don't suffer in silence hoping your partner will notice. Make the bid explicit. Can we talk? I could use a hug. Want to watch this with me? The common mistake is only investing in big moments while missing daily micro-connections. You plan elaborate date nights, but you're on your phone during dinner every night. You remember anniversaries, but you don't notice when they're trying to share something small. The daily bids matter more than the occasional grand gesture. Cheat Code 26. The Michelangelo Effect. Sculpting each other. Here's something beautiful and slightly terrifying. Your partner is shaping who you become, and you're shaping who they become. This is called the Michelangelo Effect, named after the sculptor who said he was simply revealing the figure already in the marble. Carol Rusbolt's research shows that partners sculpt each other toward their ideal selves or away from them. We internalize our partner's view of us. The way they see us, the qualities they notice and affirm, the potential they believe we have. We grow into that vision. Or we shrink away from it if they constantly criticize or diminish us. If your partner sees you as capable and affirms that capability, you become more capable. If they see you as creative and celebrate that creativity, you become more creative. But if they see you as unreliable or inadequate, you often become more of that too. Here's the application. See and affirm your partner's ideal self, not just their current self. Who are they trying to become? What do they aspire to? Reflect that back to them. I love how thoughtful you are. You have such a gift for making people feel comfortable. You're not lying or inflating. You're noticing and naming the qualities that are there, but maybe not fully realized yet. Share your own aspirations and allow your partner to support that growth. Tell them who you're trying to become. Let them see your ideal self. This gives them the opportunity to sculpt toward that vision rather than accidentally sculpting away from it. Avoid criticism that shrinks your partner away from who they want to become. If they're trying to be more confident and you constantly point out their insecurities, you're sculpting them towards smaller versions of themselves. The common mistake is either accepting someone who's fundamentally wrong for you, trying to sculpt them into someone they're not and never wanted to be, or trying to change someone fundamentally when they're happy with who they are. The sweet spot is affirming growth in directions they already value, not imposing your agenda. If they want to be more adventurous, support that. If they value being thoughtful, notice when they're thoughtful. You're not creating their ideal self. You're helping them move toward the person they already want to be. Cheat Code 27. The Self-Disclosure Reciprocity Effect. Intimacy is built through a dance of vulnerability. You reveal something personal. They reveal something back. You go a bit deeper. They match it. Back and forth, layer by layer, until you've built real closeness. This is the self-disclosure reciprocity effect. When someone reveals personal information to you, you feel psychological pressure to reciprocate. They've trusted you with something, which creates an implicit invitation, and almost an obligation, to trust them back. This is how strangers become friends, and friends become intimate partners. Through escalating mutual disclosure. Arthur Aron demonstrated this powerfully with his famous 36 questions study. He had complete strangers ask each other 36 increasingly intimate questions, from "Would you like to be famous?" to "When did you last cry in front of another person?" The questions escalated systematically from surface to deep. And the result? Strangers reported feeling closer to each other than they did to many people in their actual lives. Some pairs even fell in love. Here's the application. Share gradually more personal information and pause for reciprocation. Don't dump your entire emotional history in the first conversation. Share something. See how they respond. See if they share something back. Then go a bit deeper. Don't over-disclose before the other person has matched your vulnerability level. If you're sharing deeply painful experiences and they're still talking about their favorite TV shows, you're out of sync. That imbalance creates discomfort. Use frameworks like the 36 questions as a guide for escalating intimacy. You don't have to use those exact questions, but the principle is sound. Start with easier disclosure and progressively get more personal. The common mistake is trauma dumping too early, overwhelming someone with your deepest pain before trust is established, or never sharing anything real, which keeps the relationship perpetually surface level. Vulnerability should be reciprocal and progressively deeper, not one-sided confessions. Both people need to be leaning in, revealing gradually more, building trust through balanced exchange. Cheat Code 28. Anxious-Avoidant Trap, the Protest-Polka. Let me describe the most common dysfunctional cycle in romantic relationships. The anxious partner feels their partner pulling away, so they pursue, asking questions, seeking reassurance, wanting to talk about the relationship, maybe getting upset or critical. The avoidant partner feels overwhelmed by the intensity and pursuit, so they withdraw, getting quieter, creating more space, maybe shutting down emotionally or literally leaving. The pursuit makes the avoidant partner withdraw more. The withdrawal makes the anxious partner pursue more. Round and round, getting more intense each cycle. Sue Johnson, founder of emotionally focused therapy, calls this the Protest-Polka. Why does this happen? Because each person's fear triggers the other's core wound. The anxious partner's pursuit confirms the avoidant partner's fear of engulfment, of losing themselves, of being controlled. The avoidant partner's withdrawal confirms the anxious partner's fear of abandonment, of not being enough, of being left. Each person is acting out their attachment fear, which triggers the other person's attachment fear, and the system spirals. Here's the application. Name the pattern when you're in it. I think we're doing the thing again. I'm pursuing, you're withdrawing, and we're both getting more scared. Naming it breaks the unconscious cycle and brings awareness. If you're the anxious partner, state your needs without blame or criticism. Instead of, "You never want to spend time with me," try, "I'm feeling disconnected and I'd love to spend some time together." Instead of, "Why are you always pulling away?" try, "I'm feeling insecure and I could use some reassurance." If you're the avoidant partner, share your process before completely withdrawing. "I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need some space to process. Can we take a break and come back to this in an hour?" You're not just disappearing. You're explaining what's happening and when you'll be available again. The common mistake is blaming the other person's attachment style rather than seeing the system. You're too needy. You're too distant. But it's not individual pathology. It's a dysfunctional dance you're both doing. Breaking the cycle requires both people to act against their instincts simultaneously. The pursuer has to give space even though it feels terrifying. The withdrawer has to lean in even though it feels overwhelming. When both people move towards secure attachment behaviors at the same time, the cycle breaks. This is hard. It requires both people to be aware, willing, and working on it together. But when you can break the Protest-Polka, the relationship transforms. Cheat Code 29. Repair attempts and their acceptance. In the middle of a fight, something shifts. Maybe one of you makes a joke. Maybe someone reaches for the other's hand. Maybe you say, "I'm sorry, can we start over?" These are repair attempts, bids to de-escalate conflict and restore connection, and they're one of the most crucial factors in whether relationships survive. John Gottman's research shows that successful couples make repair attempts during conflict, and more importantly, they accept them. Unsuccessful couples often make repair attempts too, but they're either ignored or rejected. Why do repairs work? Because they prevent what Gottman calls negative sentiment override, a state where every neutral action gets interpreted negatively. When you're in negative sentiment override, your partner does something benign and you read it as hostile. They're quiet, and you think they're being passive-aggressive. They make a suggestion, and you hear criticism. Repair attempts break this negative interpretation cycle. Here's the application. Make explicit repair attempts during conflicts. Can we start over? I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I don't want to fight about this. Can I have a hug? These are clear signals that you're prioritizing the relationship over being right. Accept repair attempts even when you're still upset. This is hard. Your brain wants to stay in fight mode, wants to make your point, wants them to fully understand how wrong they were. But when they extend an olive branch, take it. Recognize what they're doing and meet them there. Use humor carefully. Humor can be an excellent repair attempt, but only if both people feel heard first. If you crack a joke before your partner feels their concern has been acknowledged, the humor feels dismissive. But once you've validated their feelings, humor can release tension beautifully. The common mistake is missing or rejecting repair attempts because you're too invested in being right. Your partner says, "I don't want to fight," and you respond with, "Well, then maybe you shouldn't have." You've just rejected the repair and escalated instead. Here's the crucial research finding. Couples who eventually divorce often made repair attempts during conflicts, but those attempts were refused or went unrecognized. The repair mechanism was there, but it wasn't accepted. Both people need to participate in repair for it to work. Cheat Code 30. The Four Horsemen. Criticism, Contempt, Defensiveness, Stonewalling. Gottman identified 4 communication patterns that predict relationship failure with disturbing accuracy. He calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And if they're regular visitors in your relationship, you're in serious trouble. First is criticism, attacking your partner's character rather than addressing specific behavior. You never think about anyone but yourself versus, "I felt hurt when you made plans without asking me." Criticism is about who they are, not what they did. Second is contempt, and this is the worst one. Contempt is treating your partner as inferior. Eye-rolling, mockery, hostile humor, sarcasm, sneering. It signals loss of respect. Gottman says contempt is the single best predictor of divorce because once you hold your partner in contempt, you've fundamentally lost respect for them as a person. Third is defensiveness, responding to complaints by deflecting blame. "I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't." Or, "I'm not the only one who does that." Defensiveness prevents you from taking any responsibility, which means nothing can be resolved. Fourth is stonewalling, emotional shutdown. We covered this earlier, but in the context of the 4 horsemen, stonewalling is the final retreat. It's when one partner completely withdraws and stops engaging. Why do they destroy relationships? Because each horseman triggers the next in a cascade. Criticism leads to defensiveness. Defensiveness frustrates the other person into contempt. Contempt overwhelms and triggers stonewalling. And once stonewalling sets in, there's no communication happening at all. Here's the application. Replace criticism with complaints about specific behaviors. Not, "You're so selfish," but, "When you made plans without checking with me, I felt overlooked." You're addressing the action, not their character. Catch defensiveness and pivot to acknowledging your partner's point before explaining yourself. "You're right. I should have called. I got caught up at work and I lost track of time." Accept your piece before explaining context. Combat contempt by actively building appreciation and respect daily. Contempt doesn't develop overnight. It's the result of accumulated resentment and negative interpretations. The antidote is to consciously focus on what you respect and appreciate about your partner. Prevent stonewalling by calling breaks before you get overwhelmed. If you feel yourself shutting down, say so and ask for time to regulate. The common mistake is thinking these are just normal fighting styles. They're not. They're danger signals. If the 4 horsemen are regular patterns in your relationship, you need intervention, therapy, serious conversation, something. Cheat Code 31. The Conflict Blueprint. Soft Startup versus Harsh Startup. Here's something remarkable. Gottman can predict the outcome of a conflict conversation with 96% accuracy based on the first 3 minutes. The first 3 minutes. How you start the conversation determines how it will end. Harsh startups, beginning with criticism, blame, or sarcasm, trigger defensiveness immediately, and once defensiveness is activated, productive conversation becomes nearly impossible. The entire interaction is derailed before it really begins. Soft startups, on the other hand, increase the chances of productive dialogue exponentially. A soft startup is non-blaming, specific, and includes a clear request. Here's the formula. I feel X about Y. I need Z. No character attacks. No, you always, or you never. Just your feeling, the specific situation, and what you need. Compare these. Harsh startup. You never help around here. I'm always doing everything myself while you just sit on the couch. Soft startup. I'm feeling overwhelmed with housework. Could we talk about dividing tasks more evenly? Same issue. Completely different entry point. The first triggers immediate defensiveness. The second invites collaboration. Here's the application. Use the soft startup formula. Start with I feel, not you are, or you always. Be specific about the situation. State your need clearly. Start with appreciation or context before the complaint. I know you've been working really hard lately, and I appreciate that. I'm feeling disconnected from you, and I'd love to carve out some time together. The appreciation softens the entry into the difficult topic. Take responsibility for your 5% of the problem up front. Even if you think the issue is 95% their fault, find your peace and own it first. I know I've been distracted too, and I could have spoken up about this earlier. I'm hoping we can. The common mistake is saving up grievances until you're at intensity level 8 out of 10, and then starting the conversation from that heightened emotional state. By the time you bring it up, you're already too activated to start softly. Gottman's method. Practice starting conversations when you're calm, not in peak frustration. If you're furious, wait. Regulate yourself first, then initiate the conversation from a calmer place. Cheat Code 32. Perpetual problems versus solvable problems. Here's something that might change your entire approach to relationship conflict. 69% of relationship problems are perpetual. They never fully resolve. You will have the same core conflicts for the entire duration of your relationship. This is based on personality differences, fundamental value differences, lifestyle preference differences, things that are part of who you are, not behaviors that can simply change. Why does this matter? Because most couples treat perpetual problems as solvable problems, and then feel like failures when the issue keeps coming up. You have the same fight about social preferences. One of you is introverted, one extroverted. You resolve it for this weekend's plans, but the underlying tension remains. Because it's perpetual, successful couples don't resolve perpetual problems. They manage them with humor, acceptance, and dialogue. They negotiate specific instances while accepting the underlying difference isn't going away. Here's the application. Identify which conflicts are perpetual. If you keep having the same fight in different contexts, it's perpetual. Different partner wants to spend money? Perpetual. One of you wants more social time than the other? Perpetual. Different levels of emotional expressiveness. Perpetual. Create dialogue around perpetual issues rather than demanding change. I know you need more downtime than I do, and I need more social interaction. How do we honor both of our needs? You're not trying to change each other. You're trying to understand and accommodate. Find compromise on solvable problems, but acceptance for perpetual ones. Solvable problems are situational. Who's doing dishes this week? Whether to go to this specific event, how to handle a particular financial decision. These can be resolved. Perpetual problems require ongoing negotiation and acceptance. The common mistake is treating perpetual problems as solvable and then feeling like relationship failures when they recur. We talked about this. Why are we fighting about it again? Because it's perpetual. It's not a failure. It's the nature of the issue. Example: introvert-extrovert social preferences. You can negotiate this specific Friday night. Maybe you go out for a bit, and then they come home early. But you can't change someone's core temperament. The negotiation will be ongoing. Cheat code 33. The negativity bias in memory and perception. Your brain is not an objective recorder of your relationship. It's heavily biased toward negative experiences, and this bias shapes how you remember your history and perceive your present. Negative experiences are weighted 3 to 5 times more heavily than positive ones in memory and decision-making. This is called negativity bias, and it evolved because survival depended more on remembering threats than remembering pleasant moments. What this means practically: one harsh comment can erase 5 compliments in your partner's mind. One criticism can overshadow a whole day of kindness. One fight can make you temporarily forget months of connection. Here's the application. Consciously counteract negativity bias by recalling positive memories during conflicts. When you're in a fight and your brain is serving up every terrible thing your partner has ever done, intentionally remember positive moments too. We're fighting right now, but last week we laughed so hard we cried. Understand the asymmetry. One bad doesn't equal one good. If you hurt your partner, an equivalent positive gesture doesn't balance it out. Your repair attempt needs to be bigger, more consistent, more sustained than the harm. Make repair attempts proportional to the negativity bias. Don't just apologize once. Follow up. Check in. Demonstrate through multiple positive interactions that the negative moment was the exception, not the rule. The common mistake is thinking one positive cancels one negative. Thinking, well, I said something harsh, but I also complimented them, so it's even. It's not even. The harsh comment will be remembered and felt more intensely. Intervention. Practice gratitude lists about your partner. Write down things you appreciate about them. This literally rewires your brain's scanning patterns. You start noticing positive qualities more because you're training your attention toward them. Cheat code 34. The apology languages and effective repair. Not all apologies land the same way. Gary Chapman, who developed the concept of love languages, also identified apology languages, different ways people need to receive apologies for them to feel genuinely repaired. There are 5. Expressing regret, I'm sorry. Accepting responsibility, I was wrong. Making restitution, how can I make this right? Genuinely repenting, I'll work on changing this. And requesting forgiveness, will you forgive me? Different people need different elements to feel an apology is complete. Some people need to hear detailed regret. They need you to specifically articulate what you're sorry for and acknowledge the impact. Others need to see behavior change above all else. Words without action feel empty. Here's the application. Learn which apology language your partner values most. Pay attention to what they ask for when they're hurt. Do they want you to say you're sorry? Do they want you to explain how you'll prevent it from happening again? Do they want you to do something to make it right? Include multiple elements in serious apologies. Don't just say, I'm sorry. Say what you're sorry for. Accept responsibility for your impact. Express what you'll do differently, and ask what they need from you. Understand that, I'm sorry, alone often isn't enough. For some people, I'm sorry, without acknowledgement of what you did wrong feels dismissive. For others, I'm sorry, without a plan for change feels meaningless. The common mistake is giving the apology you'd want rather than what they need. You value action over words, so you focus on behavior change and skip the verbal acknowledgement. But maybe your partner needs to hear the words first before they can even process your proposed changes. Example: some people need to hear you detail exactly what harm you caused. "I'm sorry I dismissed your concern. That must have felt like I don't value your perspective, and I can see why you felt hurt." Others might find that excessive. They just want to know it won't happen again. Cheat code 35: flooding and physiological soothing. We talked about this briefly earlier with stonewalling, but it deserves its own focus because understanding flooding changes how you approach conflict entirely. Flooding is when your heart rate exceeds approximately 100 beats per minute during conflict. At this point, your sympathetic nervous system activates. Blood flow shifts away from your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, empathy, perspective-taking, and toward your muscles, preparing you for physical threat. In this flooded state, rational conversation becomes neurologically impossible. You literally cannot process what your partner is saying with any nuance. You can't access empathy. You can't think clearly about solutions. Your brain has decided this is a threat situation and it's in survival mode. Here's the application. Learn to recognize your flooding symptoms. Hot face, tunnel vision, feeling like you can't hear what your partner is saying anymore, feeling attacked by everything, wanting to escape. These are physiological signals, not just emotional ones. Call for a minimum 20-minute break with agreement to return. "I'm feeling flooded. I need 20 minutes to calm down, and then I want to come back to this conversation." You're not abandoning the issue. You're creating conditions where productive conversation is actually possible. Use break time for actual physiological soothing. Go for a walk. Do deep breathing. Splash cold water on your face. Listen to calming music. Your goal is to get your heart rate back below 100 BPM. Don't spend 20 minutes rehearsing your arguments or building your case. That keeps you activated. The common mistake is trying to push through and resolve everything immediately when you're flooded. No, we need to talk about this now. But continuing a conversation when one or both people are flooded only makes things worse. You say things you don't mean. You can't process each other's points. You're just escalating. The neuroscience is clear. It takes 20+ minutes for your cardiovascular system to return to baseline after a flooding response. Respect that biological reality. Cheat code 36: the sacrifice satisfaction paradox. Here's something counterintuitive. Partners who make sacrifices for their relationship report higher satisfaction, but only when the sacrifice feels autonomous, not coerced. This is the sacrifice satisfaction paradox. Sacrifice can either strengthen your relationship or breed deep resentment. And the difference is whether you feel like you're choosing it freely or whether you feel forced into it. Self-determination theory explains this. When you make a sacrifice from genuine care, from your own values, from authentic choice, it strengthens your commitment. You feel good about prioritizing the relationship. But when sacrifice feels coerced, when you're doing it out of obligation, guilt, or fear of consequences, it breeds resentment. Here's the application. Make sacrifices from genuine care, not obligation or scorekeeping. If you're staying home because you genuinely want your partner to have a night out, that's autonomous sacrifice. If you're staying home while mentally tallying up how they owe you, that's coerced sacrifice, and it's poisoning your relationship. Acknowledge and appreciate your partner's sacrifices explicitly. When your partner gives something up for you or for the relationship, name it. "I know you really wanted to go to that event, and I appreciate you staying in with me tonight." Recognition transforms sacrifice from invisible obligation to chosen gift. Ensure sacrifices don't erase your core identity or values. Healthy sacrifice is, "I'm skipping this party to spend time with you." Unhealthy sacrifice is, "I've given up all my friendships for this relationship." If your sacrifices are fundamentally changing who you are, that's not love, that's self-erasure. The common mistake is keeping a mental ledger of sacrifices and demanding reciprocity. "I did this for you, so you owe me." Sacrifice that comes with strings attached isn't really sacrifice, it's a transaction. And transactional relationships feel hollow. Research finding: partners who make sacrifices with resentment, who feel forced or obligated, have worse relationship outcomes than partners who don't sacrifice at all. It's better not to sacrifice than to sacrifice with resentment poisoning the gesture. Cheat code 37. Repetition, compulsion, and familiar relationships. Here's something unsettling. You might be unconsciously recreating your childhood relationship dynamics in your romantic partnerships. This is called repetition compulsion, originally a Freudian concept that's been refined by modern psychology, and it explains why so many people find themselves in the same type of relationship over and over. You date someone emotionally unavailable, just like your parent was. Or you're with someone critical, echoing the dynamic you grew up with. Or you keep choosing partners who need rescuing, mirroring a caretaking role you learned early. Why does this happen? Because we unconsciously attempt to master unresolved issues from childhood. Some part of your psyche thinks, if I can make this emotionally unavailable person love me, I'll finally resolve that wound from my emotionally unavailable parent. But it doesn't work that way. You're just re-traumatizing yourself in familiar patterns. And here's the really tricky part. Familiarity feels like chemistry. When you meet someone who recreates the emotional dynamics of your childhood, it feels like this is it, or I've never felt this way before. But what you're actually feeling is the comfort of familiar patterns, even when those patterns are painful. Here's the application. Map your relationship patterns across multiple partners. What themes repeat? Are you always the pursuer? Always with people who won't commit? Always in relationships where you feel like you're not enough? Write it down. Look at the pattern objectively. Ask what your conflicts with your current partner echo from your childhood. When you fight about attention or emotional availability or feeling abandoned, what does that remind you of from your early life? The conflicts are often clues to unhealed wounds. Consciously choose partners who feel slightly unfamiliar but healthy, not just comfortable. This is hard because healthy might not feel like home if home was dysfunctional. Sometimes the right person feels almost boring compared to the intensity you're used to. That's not boring, that's secure. Learn to recognize the difference. The common mistake is mistaking trauma repetition for destiny or true love. Just because the intensity feels familiar doesn't mean it's right. Just because you've never felt this way before doesn't mean it's healthy. Sometimes what feels like soulmate recognition is actually wound recognition. This is most powerful when you can identify the pattern before it fully controls your choices. Once you see it, oh, I keep choosing people who are emotionally unavailable because my father was emotionally unavailable and I'm trying to get a different outcome. You can start making different choices. Cheat code 38. Projection and the shadow self in relationships. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the parts of yourself you've repressed or denied because they're unacceptable to you. And here's what happens with that shadow. You start seeing it in your partner. You project your own repressed traits onto them and react intensely. This is psychological projection, and it's a defense mechanism. It's easier to criticize those qualities in others than to acknowledge them in yourself. You have a disproportionate reaction when your partner does something. They're being needy, and it enrages you. They're being selfish, and you can't let it go. They're being emotional, and you shut down hard. These intense reactions often signal projection. You're seeing something in them that you've disowned in yourself. Here's the application. When you have a disproportionate reaction to your partner's behavior, ask what it mirrors in yourself. Why does their neediness bother you so much? Maybe because you've suppressed your own needs and convinced yourself you don't need anyone. Why does their anger trigger you so intensely? Maybe because you're terrified of your own anger and have spent years suppressing it. Notice patterns in what you criticize most. That's often exactly what you fear in yourself. You criticize your partner for being too emotional because you're scared of your own emotions. You criticize them for being lazy because you're afraid of your own desire to rest. You criticize them for being needy because you've buried your own need for connection. Use your relationship as a mirror for self-awareness, not just partner evaluation. When you find yourself judging your partner harshly, pause. Ask, what is this showing me about myself? What am I afraid to acknowledge in my own psychology? The common mistake is assuming your intense reaction is purely about your partner's flaw. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they're genuinely doing something problematic. But if the reaction feels out of proportion, if you can't let it go, if it haunts you, That's often projection. Example: you constantly criticize your partner's neediness. They want too much time together, too much reassurance, too much connection. But when you examine it honestly, you realize you've suppressed your own needs for connection. You've made independence your identity. And seeing their neediness confronts you with the needs you've denied in yourself. Cheat Code 39. The Fantasy Bond versus Real Intimacy. Psychologist Robert Firestone identified something he calls the fantasy bond, when couples create an illusion of closeness while actually avoiding genuine vulnerability and intimacy. From the outside, the relationship looks solid. You do everything together. You have your routines. You know each other's preferences. But underneath, there's no real emotional risk-taking, no ongoing vulnerability, no authentic encounter with each other's inner worlds. Why does this happen? Because genuine intimacy triggers existential anxiety and fear of loss. When you're truly intimate with someone, when you let them really see you, you become vulnerable to profound loss. The fantasy bond is a defense. It gives you the form of relationship without the terrifying substance. Here's the application. Notice when routines have replaced genuine connection. You have dinner together every night, but are you actually talking about anything real? You say, "I love you" automatically, but when's the last time you felt it as you said it? You have sex on a schedule, but is there actual presence and vulnerability in it? Distinguish between comfortable companionship and authentic intimacy. Companionship is valuable. It's not bad. But if that's all you have, if there's no deeper emotional risk-taking, you might be in a fantasy bond. Risk vulnerability even when the relationship feels secure enough. Don't stop sharing your fears, your hopes, your struggles just because you've been together for years. Don't assume they know everything about your inner world. Keep revealing yourself. The common mistake is settling into the form of relationship without substance, going through the motions. You live together, share responsibilities, function as a unit, but you've stopped actually encountering each other as separate, complex, evolving people. Signs of a fantasy bond. Using we excessively to the point where your individual I disappears. Interactions becoming completely routinized with no spontaneity. Lack of individual growth because you've merged into a static unit, and substituting symbols of connection, anniversary celebrations, saying, "I love you," for actual connection. Cheat Code 40. The hedonic treadmill and relationship satisfaction. You know how you get a new car and it's exciting for a few weeks, and then it just becomes your car? That's the hedonic treadmill. We adapt to positive circumstances and return to baseline happiness. And this absolutely applies to relationships. The person who thrilled you, who you couldn't stop thinking about, who made your heart race. Over time, they become familiar. Your brain adapts. The dopamine rush fades. And if you don't understand this as normal, you might think you've fallen out of love or chosen the wrong person. Why does this happen? Sensory and emotional adaptation is neurologically hardwired. Your brain is designed to stop responding intensely to repeated stimuli. It's efficient. Why keep firing the same intense neural response to something that's no longer novel? But this creates a problem in relationships. People mistake normal adaptation for a sign that something's wrong. I don't feel that spark anymore. Maybe we're not meant to be. Here's the application. Consciously practice gratitude to counteract adaptation. Your brain might take your partner for granted, but you don't have to. Actively notice things you appreciate. Write them down. Tell your partner. This isn't just feel-good advice. It's neurologically rewiring your attention patterns. Introduce controlled novelty regularly. New activities, new topics of conversation, new experiences together. You're not trying to manufacture the early relationship intensity. That's unsustainable. But you can prevent complete stagnation by consciously varying your patterns. Recognize that some boredom is predictable and normal, not a sign you've chosen wrong. Every long-term relationship has periods of mundane coexistence. That's not failure. That's just the hedonic treadmill at work. The common mistake is interpreting normal adaptation as falling out of love. You think the fading of intense early passion means the relationship is dying, when actually it means the relationship is maturing. The question isn't, do I still feel butterflies? But do I still choose this person? Do I still value this connection? Research shows relationship satisfaction typically declines over time. That's the default trajectory. But mindful couples can counteract this through conscious effort, gratitude practices, novelty, and ongoing investment. Cheat Code 41. Imago Relationship Theory. Choosing the Familiar. Harville Hendrix developed Imago Relationship Theory, and it offers a fascinating and slightly disturbing explanation for who you're attracted to. According to this theory, we're unconsciously drawn to partners who embody both the positive and negative traits of our primary caregivers. Your imago is a composite, unconscious image formed from your early relationships, and you're attracted to people who match that image because of an unconscious drive to heal childhood wounds through your adult relationships. You're not attracted to them despite the ways they remind you of your difficult parent. You're attracted to them partly because of it. Your unconscious thinks, here's another chance to get the love I didn't get as a child. But here's the problem. You're trying to heal childhood wounds with adult partners who didn't create those wounds and can't magically fix them. Here's the application. Identify your imago, the composite of caregiver traits you're drawn to. What qualities did your parents have, both positive and negative? Now look at your romantic partners. What patterns do you see? This isn't about blaming your parents. It's about understanding your unconscious programming. Understand that initial attraction may be to unhealed wounds, not actual compatibility. That intense, I've never felt this way before feeling? It might be wound recognition, not soulmate recognition. Your chemistry might be telling you this person will trigger all your unhealed stuff, not this person is right for you. Use conflicts as roadmaps to childhood unmet needs. When you fight with your partner, ask, what unmet childhood need is this touching? If you're fighting about feeling unseen, what does that echo from your past? The conflicts often point directly to the wounds you're unconsciously trying to heal. The common mistake is blaming your partner for triggering wounds they didn't create. They're not your parent. They didn't create your abandonment wound or your unworthiness wound. They're just triggering it. That's different. The therapeutic approach is conscious partnership, healing together, not wounding each other. Once you understand you're both bringing childhood wounds into the relationship, you can work together to heal them rather than unconsciously reenacting them. Cheat Code 42. Differentiation of Self. Bowen Family Systems. Murray Bowen's concept of differentiation might be the most important thing you learn about healthy relationships. Differentiation is the ability to maintain your own identity, values, and emotional equilibrium while in an intimate relationship. Low differentiation shows up in two ways: fusion or cutoff. Fusion is losing yourself in the relationship. Your identity merges completely with your partner's. You can't tell where you end and they begin. Cutoff is the opposite. You maintain identity through emotional or physical distance, avoiding intimacy to preserve yourself. High differentiation is intimacy without loss of self. You can be deeply connected while maintaining clear boundaries, your own values, your own emotional regulation. Here's the application. Maintain individual interests, friendships, and goals alongside your couple identity. You don't have to do everything together. You don't have to share all the same friends. You're allowed to have parts of your life that are just yours. State your position without requiring your partner's agreement or validation. I've decided to pursue this opportunity. Not, what do you think I should do? You can consider their input, but you don't need their permission to have your own thoughts and make your own choices. Manage your own anxiety rather than making your partner responsible for your emotions. When you're anxious, don't automatically turn to your partner to regulate you. Learn to self-soothe. Develop your own emotional management capacity. The common mistake is thinking good relationships mean complete merger or never having separate experiences. Neither extreme is healthy. Complete merger is fusion. You've lost differentiation. Never having overlap is cutoff. You're avoiding intimacy to protect yourself. Here's the paradox that Bowen identified. The more differentiated you are, the more solid in your own identity, the deeper intimacy you can actually sustain. Because you're not threatened by closeness. You know you won't disappear into the relationship, so you can risk real vulnerability without fear of losing yourself. Cheat Code 43. love maps, and the small things that aren't small. John Gottman uses the term love maps to describe detailed knowledge of your partner's inner world, their current stresses, their dreams, their fears, their joys, the landscape of their psychological and emotional life. Early in relationships, everyone builds detailed love maps. You ask endless questions. You're fascinated by every detail. You remember everything they tell you. But over time, couples stop updating their love maps. They assume they know everything. They stop asking questions. And slowly, they become strangers living in the same house. Why does this matter? Because love maps create the feeling of being known, which is one of the deepest human needs in intimate relationship. When your partner remembers that you're stressed about the presentation next week, when they ask about your difficult friend by name, when they know your current struggles and aspirations, you feel seen, known, important. Here's the application. Regularly update your knowledge of your partner's current stresses, dreams, fears, and joys. Don't assume yesterday's stress is today's stress. Don't assume last year's dream is still this year's dream. People evolve. Keep learning them. Ask questions about their inner world even when logistics dominate conversation. Yes, you need to discuss who's picking up groceries and when the bills are due. But also, what's been on your mind lately? What are you excited about? What's been hard this week? Remember and reference details they've shared. Their friends' names, their work concerns, their childhood memories. When you reference these details, you're demonstrating that you listen, that their inner world matters to you, that you're paying attention. The common mistake is assuming you know your partner completely and stopping the curiosity. I know them so well. Do you? Do you know what they're worried about right now? What they're hoping for? What's shifted in their inner world in the past month? Research shows that couples with detailed, updated love maps navigate conflicts better because they have context for each other's reactions. And they feel more connected during mundane periods because even when life is routine, they're still learning each other. Cheat Code 44, the three-stage model of love, lust, attraction, attachment. Anthropologist Helen Fisher mapped the neuroscience of romantic love and discovered something crucial. What we call love is actually three distinct brain systems, each with its own neurochemistry and purpose. Stage 1 is lust, driven by testosterone and estrogen. This is pure sexual desire. It's biology saying reproduce. It's not specific to any particular person. It's the general drive for sexual gratification. Stage 2 is attraction, the falling in love phase. This is where dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin create that obsessive, can't eat, can't sleep. Think about them constantly feeling. This is what most people think of as being in love. Your heart races when you see them. You replay conversations in your mind. You check your phone constantly hoping they texted. fMRI studies show that brains in the attraction phase light up in the same regions activated by cocaine. It's literally addictive. Stage 3 is attachment, long-term bonding driven by oxytocin and vasopressin. This is the calm, secure, deep connection that allows for lasting partnership. It's less intense than attraction, but it's what sustains relationships over decades. Here's what matters. Each stage has completely different neurochemistry. And what feels like real love, that obsessive attraction phase, is actually just stage 2. It's temporary by design. It typically lasts 12 to 24 months, and then your brain chemistry shifts toward attachment. Here's the application. Don't make major life decisions during the attraction phase. Don't move across the country. Don't get married. Don't make babies until you've moved into attachment and can evaluate the relationship without the cocaine-like dopamine high clouding your judgment. Understand that the transition from attraction to attachment feels like loss of spark, but is actually deepening. When the obsessive intensity fades, people panic. I don't feel it anymore. Maybe they're not the one. But that shift is normal and necessary. Attraction neurochemistry is unsustainable. You'd never get anything done. Attachment is what allows for actual partnership. Recognize you can experience all three stages with different people simultaneously. You can feel attachment to your long-term partner, lust for someone you see at the gym, and attraction to someone new you're getting to know. These systems operate independently. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human with a complex nervous system. The common mistake is thinking the dopamine rush of early attraction should last forever. It won't. It can't. Your brain literally will not sustain that level of neurochemical intensity. The question isn't, do I still feel butterflies? But is there genuine compatibility underneath the chemistry? Cheat code 45. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone beyond the myth. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone or cuddle chemical. And while that's partially true, the reality is more complex and interesting. Oxytocin is released during physical touch, orgasm, childbirth, even during positive social interactions. It reduces activity in your amygdala, the fear center, and increases trust and social bonding. This is why physical touch feels so connecting, why sex creates emotional bonds, why holding hands with your partner actually calms your nervous system. Here's the application. Increase oxytocin through non-sexual physical touch. Cuddling, massage, holding hands, hugging for at least 20 seconds. These aren't just nice gestures. They're neurochemically bonding you to each other. Understand that sex creates bonding even in incompatible relationships. This is why friends with benefits situations often get complicated. You can't consistently have sex with someone and not develop some attachment. Your brain is being flooded with bonding hormones. The neurochemistry doesn't know you're just casual. Use physical connection intentionally during repair attempts after conflicts. A hug, holding hands while you talk, sitting close. These aren't just comfort gestures. They're activating oxytocin, which is literally making you both more trusting and less defensive. But here's what most people don't know. Oxytocin has a dark side. It doesn't just create warm, fuzzy feelings. It also intensifies negative social emotions. It increases envy, makes you more biased against outsiders, and makes you defensive of your partner even when they're objectively wrong. Oxytocin creates an us versus them mentality. It bonds you to your in-group and makes you more suspicious or hostile toward outgroups. In relationships, this means oxytocin can make you irrationally defensive of your partner, blind to their flaws, or hostile to anyone who criticizes them. The common mistake is thinking oxytocin only creates positive feelings. It's a bonding hormone, not a happiness hormone. It bonds you to whoever you're with, for better or worse. This is why people can feel intensely bonded to partners who aren't actually good for them. Cheat code 46. The Coolidge effect, novelty, and sexual desire. Sexual desire spikes with new partners and then naturally, inevitably declines with familiar partners. This is called the Coolidge effect, and it's documented across mammals. The famous study, male rats will mate with a female until completely exhausted. Then they'll show no interest in her at all. But introduce a new female, and suddenly the male rat has energy again. His sexual interest wasn't depleted, it was just depleted for that particular female. Why did this evolve? Genetic diversity advantage. From a purely biological standpoint, mating with multiple partners increases reproductive success. Dopamine, the novelty and reward chemical, spikes for new partners. Familiarity, by contrast, reduces dopamine response. This is uncomfortable to talk about because it sounds like it dooms long-term relationships. But understanding it actually helps. Here's the application. Normalize that sexual desire patterns change over time in long-term relationships. The frequency and intensity of early relationship sex is not sustainable. That doesn't mean passion is dead. It means it's transforming. Introduce novelty within the relationship. New contexts for sex, different locations, different times of day, new scenarios or role play, variations in routine. You're not becoming a different person. You're introducing enough novelty to activate the dopamine system that responds to unpredictability. Understand that desire decline doesn't mean attraction loss. You can still find your partner attractive while experiencing less spontaneous sexual desire than you did initially. That's normal adaptation, not relationship failure. The common mistake is interpreting natural desire decline as a sign you're with the wrong person or that the relationship is dying. Desire declining over time happens in every long-term relationship. The question is whether you're willing to consciously maintain sexual connection despite the biology working against you. The research is clear and consistent across species. Novelty drives desire. But you can create novelty with the same partner through conscious variation and unpredictability. Cheat Code 47. Stress and relationship perception. Cortisol's impact. Chronic stress doesn't just make you tired or irritable. It fundamentally alters how you perceive your relationship. When you're stressed, your brain is flooded with cortisol, which keeps you in threat detection mode. Everything becomes a potential danger, including neutral behaviors from your partner. Your partner is quiet, and instead of thinking they're just tired, you think they're mad at you. They make a suggestion, and instead of hearing it as helpful, you hear it as criticism. They're on their phone, and instead of assuming they're just distracted, you feel ignored. This isn't paranoia. It's your stress-flooded brain interpreting everything through a threat lens. The neuroscience is clear. Chronic cortisol reduces gray matter in your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for judgment, perspective-taking, and empathy. Simultaneously, it enlarges your amygdala, the fear and reactivity center. You literally have less access to rational thinking and more access to fear-based reactivity. Here's the application. Recognize when external stress is bleeding into your relationship evaluation. You had a terrible week at work, and suddenly you're questioning the entire relationship. You're financially stressed, and your partner's normal habits are driving you crazy. Notice the correlation. Your perception is being distorted by stress. Don't make relationship decisions during high-stress periods. If you're in the middle of a crisis, job loss, family illness, major life transition, your perception is compromised. Wait until you're regulated before evaluating whether your relationship is actually working. Practice stress reduction together. Exercise, meditation, time in nature. These aren't just individually beneficial. They protect your relationship by keeping both nervous systems regulated enough to perceive each other accurately. The common mistake is attributing stress-induced irritability to relationship problems. We've been fighting so much lately. Maybe we're not compatible. But look at the context. Are you both stressed about external things? That stress is likely the real problem, not your compatibility. Cheat Code 48. The neuroscience of heartbreak. Why it physically hurts. Heartbreak isn't just an emotional metaphor. It's neurologically real pain. Studies using fMRI scans show that when people look at photos of their exes after a breakup, the same brain regions light up that activate during physical injury, specifically the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula. Social pain activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Your brain processes rejection, abandonment, and loss of connection as genuine threats to survival, because evolutionarily, they were. For our ancestors, social connection was survival critical. Being rejected by the group could mean death. So rejection needed to hurt enough to motivate us to avoid it and to maintain our social bonds. This is why heartbreak feels like physical injury. Because to your brain, it is. Here's the application. Validate that heartbreak is neurologically real pain, not weakness or being too emotional. You're not overreacting. Your pain network is genuinely activated. Telling yourself to just get over it is like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off. Use pain management strategies rather than expecting logic to fix emotional pain. Distraction works. Keeping busy. Engaging in activities. Social support works. Being with people who care about you. Time works. The pain genuinely does decrease as neural pathways reorganize. These are the same strategies that work for physical pain because the neural mechanisms are the same. Understand that withdrawal symptoms from a lost relationship are chemically similar to addiction withdrawal. You are getting regular hits of dopamine, oxytocin, and other bonding chemicals from this person. Now you're not. Your brain is in withdrawal. The obsessive thoughts, the physical cravings to contact them, the inability to focus. These are withdrawal symptoms. The common mistake is telling yourself or others to just get over it when the brain needs processing time. There's no shortcut through grief. The neural pathways associated with that person need to be reorganized. That takes time, typically several months to a year for significant relationships. Research by neuroscientist Helen Fisher showed that even months after breakups, seeing a photo of an ex activated both the pain network and the addiction network. Heartbreak is both pain and withdrawal simultaneously. Cheat code 49, dopamine, reward prediction error, and keeping spark alive. Here's a crucial concept from neuroscience. Dopamine doesn't spike for predictable rewards. It spikes for unexpected ones. This is called reward prediction error. When something is better than you predicted, dopamine surges. When something matches your prediction, dopamine stays flat. When something is worse than predicted, dopamine drops. This is why novelty feels exciting and predictability feels boring. It's not moral failing or lack of commitment. It's fundamental neuroscience. Your brain evolved to reward unpredictability because in survival terms, unexpected resources were worth paying attention to. In relationships, this creates a tension. Total unpredictability creates anxiety and insecurity. But total predictability kills desire and excitement. You need both. Predictability in some domains, unpredictability in others. Here's the application. Maintain strategic unpredictability in positive ways. Surprise gestures. Unexpected adventures. Coming home with flowers for no reason. Suggesting something spontaneous when your partner expects the usual routine. You're creating positive reward prediction errors. Things are better than expected. Vary patterns of connection and affection. Don't always kiss goodbye the same way. Don't always have sex in the same pattern. Don't always spend Saturday nights the same way. The variation keeps the dopamine system engaged. But understand the balance. Some predictability creates security, but total predictability kills desire. You want to be reliably emotionally available, reliably trustworthy, reliably aligned on values. But you don't want to be completely predictable in how you express affection, in your daily rhythms, in your interactions. The common mistake is either being completely predictable, which leads to boredom and desire decline, or creating anxiety through inconsistency. Being unpredictably available or unpredictably kind isn't exciting. It's destabilizing. The balance, predictability in reliability and core values, unpredictability in expression and experiences. Your partner should know you're there for them, predictable, but not know exactly what you're going to do next, unpredictable. So we've covered 49 psychological principles tonight, from how first impressions form to how your brain literally rewires itself through relationship experiences. These aren't magic tricks or manipulation tactics. They're insights into how human connection actually works beneath the surface. The truth is, relationships are the most complex thing you'll ever navigate. They're the intersection of two people's entire psychological histories, their neurochemistry, their unconscious patterns, their conscious choices. But understanding the patterns, recognizing when you're in a Protest-Polka cycle, or noticing when you're projecting your shadow, or catching a flooding moment before it derails everything. This understanding gives you agency. You can't control whether someone chooses you, or whether chemistry sparks, or whether attachment styles align perfectly. But you can understand what's happening. You can recognize the difference between trauma repetition and genuine compatibility. You can make repair attempts and actually notice when they're offered back. You can build real intimacy instead of a fantasy bond. And maybe most importantly, you can be patient with yourself and your partner. Because you're not just dealing with the person in front of you. You're dealing with their entire history, their nervous system, their attachment wounds, their neurochemistry. And they're dealing with all of yours too. So whether you're single and preparing for the next connection, in the early stages of something promising, or decades into a partnership that needs revitalization, these principles are tools. Use them with care. Use them with ethics. Use them to build something real. Sweet dreams. And may your relationships be conscious, connected, and genuinely fulfilling. And if you have enjoyed this journey, consider subscribing. It really helps.